YouTube. There we go. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoy this service. And let me just get myself situated here. All right, here we go.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Welcome, everyone, to this collaborative worship service. We're so pleased that you all are with us this morning. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, we welcome you to this sacred space. Well, this morning you're in for a treat because you will be hearing from ministers and musicians from several of our Unitarian Universalist churches, including Belmont, Kingston, Quincy, Canton, Bridgewater, and Medfield, where I'm streaming from this morning. Our meeting houses were built on the indigenous lands of the Wampanoag and the Massachusetts peoples. My colleagues and I are calling this service now more than ever. For during this time of isolation, sadness, and loss, it's important to remember that we are not alone, that our congregations are needed to hold us, to support us, to nurture us now more than ever. So now I would invite you to hear the words of Ted Lasso as we enter into this sacred space. Now look it, this is a sad moment right here for all of us. There's nothing I can say standing here in front of you that can take that away. But please, do me this favor. Lift your heads up and look at everybody else here. And I want you to be grateful that you are going through this sad moment with all of these other folks. Because I promise you, there is something worse than being sad. And that's being sad and being alone. Ain't nobody here alone. Come, let us worship together.
As we begin our worship, we light our chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We light our chalice with these words by the Reverend Deborah Falk. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us.
I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in love. I believe in love, even
Once upon a time, his eyes opened wide. And he looked around and he was a little bit confused because it was a world that he saw that was unlike any other world that he had seen. And the first thing he noticed was that there were fires going on. Some big fires, some small fires. And he looked around and he thought, what is going on? Otherwise, it was very dark. And he could sort of make out the sort of silhouettes of people, some of them running away, some of them running towards the fires. And he was a little bit confused, and he saw the people running away, and that seemed like a good idea. And so part of him wanted to run away. And then somebody ran up to him and they said, we need your help. We need to put out these fires. And they ran towards the area where there was even more fires. And he thought, well, it's not a bad thing to run away. I could also just run away. That seems like a good choice. But there was something inside of him, something deep inside of him, where he knew that he could help. He knew that there was something for him to do. And so he decided to go towards the fires. And so he did. He started first walking and then running a little bit toward the fires. And it felt like a good decision. But then he was like, what am I supposed to do? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And he stopped and he saw that there was a couple other people 20, 30 feet off, also moving towards the fire, also a little bit unsure. And then he felt this strange sensation. Right there in the middle of his sort of higher part of his belly, he felt this strange kind of glowing sensation, and he knew somehow that this was the thing. This was the way that he was going to help, that maybe he was sort of part superhero and there was some special thing inside of him, and so it started to glow and glowed a little bit more. And he reached out his hands and he was expecting some wonderful magical thing, and sure enough, something started to come out of the glow, and as soon as he knew it, he was holding a frisbee. And he thought, a frisbee? What am I going to do with a frisbee? But he knew that that was part of it, somehow. And so he took a couple steps forward, and then he felt the frisbee sort of being pulled, and he looked up and there was somebody else, kind of looked like they were coming towards him, and they were holding a long, floppy piece of what maybe looked like plastic, almost like one of those floppy sleds. And he thought, that doesn't seem a whole lot more helpful than a frisbee. But he knew the frisbee was drawn to that person, and he felt drawn to that person. And then sure enough, somebody else was walking towards them, and they had a kind of a rainbow-shaped piece of metal, even less helpful, just like a little hook-looking thing. But still, he was being drawn towards them too, and they came together, and he held out his frisbee, the one guy, and the other held out this big long floppy thing, and then the other held out the rainbow hook, and they came together, and then they could see it, they could smile, they felt somehow that the three of them, that together there was something more that they could do. And the frisbee and the floppy and the hook, they all came together, fused together, and the floppy piece wrapped itself around and landed right on the frisbee, and the hook came over and attached itself to the top, and they had a bucket, and each of them holding it, they had this one huge bucket. And they looked around, and sure enough, they were getting closer and closer, and there was lots and lots of fires. And somebody said, quick, down to the river. And they held the bucket, and the bucket became 3 buckets, and they each had a bucket. And they ran down to the river, and they came back up with huge buckets of water, and they poured it out. And it felt good. It felt good because they were doing something, and they were helping. And they knew that each of them alone had a piece of what they needed, but together, something new, something more effective, more beautiful, more whole was created. These buckets. And friends, the world is on fire. Together, we make buckets. And we work to heal and help this world. But that's not the end of the story. Because as they were bringing up big buckets of water, as they were putting out fires, one of them said, "This is really, really good, but who's throwing these fireballs and starting these fires?" And they looked at each other and they wondered. And that's part of our work too. Our work is to put out the fires, to work to serve, to heal this world, but also to ask the larger questions, also to work to alleviate the causes of so much suffering. So, we give thanks for all these buckets, for all these fires, for all this calling within us to help heal, quench, and serve. Amen.
Please join me now in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, source of mystery and wonder, this winter of our lives is hard. While we know spring will arrive, we find ourselves in a time of uncertainty and discontent. That still, small voice we rely on for comfort, for compassion, can become lost in the din and confusion of the messiness of our daily lives. We seek your calming presence now more than ever, so that moments of respite may renew our souls. We seek your loving presence now more than ever, so that moments of heart-opening compassion may fill our spirits. We seek your wise presence now more than ever, so that moments of clarity can guide us forward. Spirit of life and love, source of mystery and wonder, be with us now. Act through us. As we, the beloved community gathered here, journey through yet another winter. We need you and one another more now than ever. May it be so, and blessed be.
As a Unitarian Universalist minister, I do a lot of checking in. At just about every gathering I attend with congregants or colleagues, we begin with a ritualized check-in, during which we share the daily struggles and successes, joys and sorrows, disappointments and hopes that give shape and texture to our lives. I love that we pause in this way to remind one another of our shared humanity and to hold one another in care and compassion. These days, I find myself starting my check-ins in the same way. Well, I'm doing okay in my small circles, but I'm constantly anxious about the big systems in our world that seem to be coming undone. I usually get a lot of knowing looks and sympathetic nods. Lately, I go about my days with a kind of dual awareness. I feel myself part of systems both big and small, and often it's the small systems in my life, my family, my congregation, my friend groups, that feel relatively stable. In them, I find comfort, compassion, inspiration, connection, purpose, sometimes even hope and joy. It's the big systems that feel tenuous, the global, national, and societal systems that are barely hanging on by a thread. Those big systems loom large in our collective consciousness, perhaps because they garner so much more media attention, and we are constantly barraged by the media, both traditional and social. It feels like a steady stream of doom that makes it feel like the whole world is falling apart. The big systems that organize our world do matter a lot, and yet our human world is also made up of many, many, many more small-scale systems, relationships, families, clubs, communities, schools, workplaces, local governments, arts organizations, grassroots movements. Because they function on a smaller scale in less visible ways, these small systems can feel less relevant or important. Yet I believe they matter now more than ever. In the face of large-scale systems breakdown, our hope for the future lies in the small systems. And this is good news for regular folks, because it is in the small systems of our lives that we have most influence, where we can make a difference, where we can keep democratic processes alive, where we can learn to live in more sustainable ways, where we can foster inclusivity and diversity, where we can honor our shared humanity. This is also good news for Unitarian Universalist congregations. Our churches and fellowships are among those small systems where people come to practice democratic values, to promote inclusivity and belonging, and to cultivate more love and compassion in the world. While these very values are failing in a broader national systems, they are the beating heart at the center of our congregations. It may be too late to fix the large-scale systems, but we can invest at the micro level in our local communities and congregations with our energy and talents, our creativity and compassion, our resources, and most of all, our love for this life, for one another, and for our world. In my attempts to stay grounded and hopeful in these anxious times, I've been returning to an image from the book Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard, a renowned forest ecologist. Simard is best known for her discovery that trees communicate with one another by way of biochemical signals across vast underground fungal networks. In her work, she describes old-growth trees, what she calls mother trees, as hubs in this vast network. Essentially, mother trees are large-scale systems in the forest ecosystem, which is also made up of lots and lots of interconnected smaller trees and seedlings. These are the nodes, the small-scale systems. Samard discovered that when mother trees come under severe threat, they send out extra loads of carbon and defense signals to the seedlings in their networks. In essence, the mother trees recognize that the hope for the forest's future lies in the smaller scale systems, the young trees and seedlings, and so the mother tree invests them with what wisdom and resources she has left to give. In the same way, I believe our hope for bringing about a just and compassionate future lies in the small systems, in the micro communities like our congregations, where we can keep our values alive and thriving. Like the seedlings of the forest, we are connected to all the other micro systems. As we invest in our own congregations, we can also join in solidarity with our sibling congregations and other faith communities and community organizations that share our values, our hopes, and our dreams for the future. In these hard days, when despair looms, we need our faith communities now more than ever for comfort and solace, for inspiration and encouragement, for connection and care, for hope. At the same time, I believe with all my heart that our world needs our faith communities now more than ever to keep the promise of the beloved community alive. May it be so.
This is the time in our service where we invite forward an offering to help support the good work of these churches, both within and beyond our walls. You can go to any of our websites and find a button to make online donations. Now more than ever, your support of our congregations and Unitarian Universalism makes such a difference. We can make it through this challenging time. We can thrive with your support. We are so deeply grateful for all you are about to give.
When I was a child, I thought trees were magical. I grew up in Louisiana, a place full of ancient mossy oak trees that I loved to climb, and cypress tree knees sticking up out of the river. We lived on a river and would often ride our boat from our house over to my grandmother's house. And as we went, I would lean far out over the edge of our boat, trying to touch those cypress knees that jutted up out of the water as we floated by. I remember my grandmother teaching me that the reason the stands of pine trees behind our home grew so close together was so that the trees could protect and hold each other up in heavy storms, like hurricanes, which we had a lot of in Louisiana. I was amazed that such seemingly inanimate things knew actually how to take care of each other. But they do, and that's the thing. There's so much scientific evidence that trees support each other. Through their root systems, they communicate with each other, and they nurture the other plants and animals that grow in their midst. That's because scientists are increasingly finding that cooperation is what drives biological evolution, not competition. For so long, Darwin's theory of evolution, the survival of the fittest, has driven a narrative of nature and humanity as one of inherent competition. Who's on top? Who's beating you down to take your place? Who eats who to survive? And no surprise, this theory fits nicely into the larger colonialist and capitalist themes of the West, that the earth, including humans, is a wealth of resources from which those with power can take and take and take. Because whoever has the power to dominate can and should dominate. And where has that brought us today? To a climate crisis, to a culture of scarcity, and a society of prejudice, division, and hatred. It is long past time to turn away from this competitive view of nature, this insatiable culture of war and want and greed. And we need church now more than ever to help us. The forest biologist Suzanne Simard wrote a book about the wisdom and cooperation of forests called Finding the Mother Tree. She makes the case, as others have made and continue to make, that the forest is a single organism wired for wisdom and care. In an interview on NPR, Simard stated, quote, "We've got to embrace our place in nature as one with nature. These trees, they evolved long before we did. They're resilient, and they're meant to help us be reproductive societies." Now for me, Unitarian Universalism is my forest environment. When I found my way to the UU Church about a decade ago, it opened up a whole new way of being religious, of being in community that I had ever known was possible. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that we are all members of the interconnected web of existence. That means my thriving is completely dependent on your thriving. Humanity's survival is utterly reliant on nature's survival. We are all part of one home, and if one of us goes down, the rest will follow. But it also means that if we work together to create a resilient and flourishing home, then we're all lifted up. That's why church matters so much right now, because in a world of competition, we embrace the truth that we really can't make it without each other. That's fundamental to our faith. As the Reverend Teresa Soto writes, all of us need all of us to survive. The truth of our interdependence forms the foundation of all of our efforts for justice and for peace. So in a culture and society which works tirelessly to disconnect and distract us, to turn us away from each other and toward the next shiny thing or the next hateful tweet of the moment, we need church to remind us that we belong to each other. We exist in a network of wisdom and care, if only we can be present enough to see it. When we are able to remember that and turn toward each other, we also turn back to ourselves and the beings that we were created to be. We turn back to our histories, our ancestors, our belonging to this great mystery of life in which we all play a part. We live into the truths of who we actually are. not dividing and conquering, but nurturing each other towards healing, growth, and flourishing. The origin of the word religion is from the Latin religare, meaning to bind together, to connect. We need church now more than ever to remind us of the deep, inherent connections that we already share, the sacred space that allows us to truly see and embrace each other, the ecosystem of love and justice that binds us together. We need church, and the world needs it too, now more than ever. May it be so, and amen.
Broken down and tired, living life on this merry-go-round. You can't find the fighter. I see it in you, so we're gonna walk it out and move mountains. Gonna walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, the silence isn't quiet. It feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying. I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains. Bring it to its feet to move mountains. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. All we'll need is hope, that we have each other. Oh, we have each other. We'll rise. Oh, we will rise. We'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again, and we'll rise up, high like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, we'll rise up, yeah.
Good morning. I am the Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an affiliate community minister with the United First Parish Church, UU, in Quincy, Massachusetts, where we are right now, where we sit on the unceded lands of the Neponset Band of the original Massachusetts people. I'm a 5-foot, 2-inch tall woman standing in our Quincy sanctuary at this pulpit, this very historic pulpit, and wearing glasses, black pants, a red and blue flower top, and a turquoise layer of stoles, for those of you who are visually impaired or otherwise can't see this video. Our service theme is now more than ever. Now more than ever, we need one another. We need our faith communities, our spiritual communities, our religious communities. Others in this service will speak to faith ministries and practices within our congregations, within the brick and mortar of the walls of our congregations. As a community minister, however, I want to remind us today that now more than ever, we also need the faith of our larger ministry to the communities beyond the walls of our brick and mortar buildings. This is the heartbeat of community ministry within our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Community ministry encompasses a broad scope of ministries, not only our social justice ministries, but also our pastoral care and spiritual direction ministries, and our creative arts ministries, as well as our academic ministries, among many other ministries not named or not yet envisioned. Our community ministers, whether ordained or commissioned or lay, often are on the front lines of the deep needs of our hurting, shared world these days. And they always have been, from the time of our first recognized community minister in the 19th century Unitarian history, Joseph Tuckerman, who ministered to the poor in Boston. That particular community ministry today is known as our Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry in Boston, and that was a focal point for nearly 18 years of my own community ministry as a Unitarian Universalist, first in a lay capacity and then ordained, and inclusive of my dual identity as a social worker, sharing and facilitative partnership with 12 different Unitarian Universalist congregations at the end. I then brought my lived experiences with that particular community ministry into another community ministry in an academic context through teaching and writing at Boston University, where I continue today, inclusive of my private practice as a pastoral psychotherapist and spiritual director. Through the urban ministry experience, direct relationships were made by Unitarian Universalist volunteers across lines of race and class that became enduring points of commitment to our anti-racism commitments for these volunteers. Yet I also want to stress that much of the work of community ministry can be equally on the front lines, but less visible for their substantial impact. I think of the many UU community ministers I know who are engaged in hospice care and chaplaincy, particularly in these times of COVID, and who accompany people of diverse ethnic and religious traditions through sickness and death. I hear these stories often, and I'm thinking today particularly of one seminarian in the UUMA Ministerial Formation Network group that I facilitate for community ministers. She recounted being able to provide culturally sensitive pastoral care and advocacy in her setting because of her Unitarian Universalist identity, to 3 different families experiencing the death of a loved one, all in the same day. An evangelical Christian family, a Sikh family, and a West African family. She had to draw on enormous skill sets to know the diverse traditions that were important for solace for these families that day. We don't hear these stories of community ministry, but we should, now more than ever. I want to pause for a moment to read the 1988 Community Ministry Proclamation and Covenant, a passionate document that represents the highest aspirations of the meaning of community ministry for our faith tradition, now more than ever. It reads, "We, as people living in a world that is both dying and seeking to be reborn, who are shaken to our very roots by the massiveness and depth of planetary and human suffering, are empowered by a driving passion to bear witness to that suffering, participate in its transformation, and affirm the inherent glory of life. Therefore do we covenant together to respond to these cries of pain, to our own brokenness, and to awaken the healing spirit of hope, to engage in a broad spectrum of ministries through and with UU congregations, the larger community, and increasingly in a global context, to celebrate the diversity of life within our elemental interconnectedness, to challenge one another as individuals and as members of institutions to identify, analyze, and act upon the basic causes of human hurt and separation. Thus empowered, we join hands with the community of faith in acknowledging the larger ministry which addresses our common vision. We call upon our denomination to recognize a variety of lay and ordained ministries as embodiments of the Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes. It goes on to list the varieties of creative ministries at that time and ends with such compassionate, liberating, prophetic ministries are at the very heart of our religious tradition. Now more than ever, we need our community ministers and ministries to be supported in connection with our congregations, and all of our lives and our Unitarian Universalist faith itself are enriched by being in touch with and supporting the breadth and scope of our faith in action through these community ministries. I often speak and preach on my belief that our seventh UU principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, is our metaphoric God language. We know our ecological interdependence and source of being, inclusive of and beyond the inherent worth and dignity of each of us, through this language in our seventh UU principle. We know that the challenges of these times are beyond the capacity of any single individual to surmount, but together we are stronger and can deepen and expand the reach of our faith tradition and values. Through connecting with and supporting our diverse community ministries, including by providing opportunities for affiliation and endorsement through commissioning, may we all know their particular role in deepening and expanding our Unitarian Universalist reach in these times. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
As we prepare to leave this sacred space, remember that we are on a journey through a difficult, bitter, cold winter. We didn't ask to be in this place, but yet here we are. In the coming days and weeks and months, we may find ourselves in the wilderness, isolated, sick, grieving, doubting that the spring will ever come. But look around. We are not alone. It's our journey together, a journey toward a deeper care for one another, a journey toward more equity for those often forgotten, a journey toward a profound love that holds us and comforts us, especially when those harsh winds blow. So friends, no matter what, no matter how cold it might seem right now, remember that nothing can hold back spring. I will now extinguish our chalice, but may its light and warmth remain in our hearts until we meet again. Here ends our worship. Let our service begin.
It don't have a job, won't pay your bills, or buy you a home in Beverly Hills. Won't fix your life in 5 easy steps. Ain't the law of the land or the government. whole world will know that we're not alone. He's waiting for you, knocking at your door. Oh, in the moment of truth, when your heart is the floor and you're on your knees, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm. And I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. 'Cause even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first day of the rest of your life. 'Cause even in the dark, you can still see the light. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. So just call me brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. And love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storm. And I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not